Hi, this is Tisch Aitken, and I'm just doing a quick report to discuss what's happening astrologically for the rest of the week. Although it is Thursday, it's a pretty powerful week, and we had a very heavy week last week as well, because last week we had the sun in Aries setting off the stellium of planets in Capricorn, which began the year. And that is, again, the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto at the world axis at 22 degrees of Capricorn. But that also entailed on January 12th, that involved the south node of and Jupiter, the planet of expansion, also in Capricorn. And the sun was in Capricorn, closely conjunct this Saturn-Pluto pairing within a degree. And Mercury was at 23 degrees of Capricorn. So lots of Capricorn. We're never going to see that many outer planets in our lifetime. It's been more than 500 years that the Saturn and Pluto have met up in Capricorn, and I think that's enough for us in this lifetime. And it is permanent changes. It's really an ending of how we do things in many ways. It doesn't mean that everything is ending, of course, but it's collapsing of old structures in order to morph with a new world. And it's permanent change, and we have to be strong, and we have to grow with adjusting to this. And luckily, for the most part of the year, we've had many planets in cardinal signs. Now, that many planets in Capricorn is permanent change in terms of, I think, traditional goals. Some institutions will no longer be doing work the way they used to do. It's a lot of loss, obviously. There are a lot of bigger things at stake, but also it's the fact that perhaps now when Saturn's briefly in the sign of Aquarius, and it entered there 2 days after the equinox, and entered on March 21st, and it will be in Aquarius until July 2nd. And it's also in its rulership in Aquarius. It's just not as intense and as heavy and karmic as when it's in Capricorn. But it gives us all a preview of, we're seeing restrictions, because Saturn's always going to give us some restriction in whatever area it's in. And in this case, it's regarding how we socialize, how we network. Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, and Saturn is the ancient ruler of Aquarius. And that's a sign that deals with groups and communities, and it deals with friends and acquaintances, and it is very much a sign of networking. So that's been our first restriction with Saturn in Aquarius. Yet I also feel, because later in the year, Jupiter is also going to enter the sign of Aquarius on December 20th. Saturn re-enters Aquarius on December 17th, and the two will meet up in the sky to form what's called a great conjunction, and that's going to be at 0 degrees of Aquarius, the first degree of the sign, a degree of new beginnings in a sign that is a fixed air sign, very much about community, about communication, because all air signs are about communication. It's about the mind, it's about brilliance and ingenuity. And right now we are being challenged in many ways. Uranus is also in the sign of Taurus, and a few years ago, before we had all this Capricorn piling up, we were starting to see it slowly but surely. Saturn had already entered Capricorn, and Pluto had been in Capricorn a while, as had the nodes. Well, the nodes of fate had not yet entered, but this is in May of 2018. And when Uranus initially entered the sign of Taurus, I remember many saying that there'll be a lot of change with the Earth. Uranus is the great awakener, and it's going to teach us ways to treat the nature a lot better and the world a lot better, but also a lot more around plant-based medicine and alternative ways of healing ourselves and dealing with depression and anxiety and many things that are also obviously going to become more prominent in the world we're in right now temporarily because of all the restrictions, and for people dealing with mental illness and depression and with great loss as we are. Well, this is going to be another thing that I think Saturn and Aquarius will examine, is about going forward in terms of morphing and transitioning to a much more digital world in terms of how we do business, but finding much more balance and connecting in real ways where we have real conversation and real dialogue. It can't be through texting and all this stuff all the time. It just can't. And so I think that will be another issue. But in terms of this weekend, we have Pluto stationing retrograde on the 25th. We feel that energy 5 days before and 5 days after. And right now, the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, may not be, he's in critically ill, and they don't know who the leader of North Korea will be. That kind of stuff gets emphasized. Pluto, when it stations retrograde or direct, can be dealing with earthquakes or volcanic eruptions, and that's happened. And there's a lot of heated energy. And with Mercury now, just as the sun set off all the planets in Capricorn last week and was very volatile, and there were some protests, especially in the middle of the week, over the weekend when Pluto stations retrograde, we're going to have Mercury in Aries, which is, very blunt and says it as it is, squaring Pluto at 24 degrees of Aries, of Capricorn rather. Well, that can be many, fierce words can be said with that combination. And I would say incredible power struggles and probably some battles that lead to fights and endings and relationships with that if people don't tone it down, but also uncovering hidden information and secrets. Lots of power playing with that. And also the following day on Sunday, the sun in Taurus meets up with Uranus in Taurus. And that is expect the unexpected. Now, for some people, they might be falling madly in love, albeit at a distance, over the weekend, and that could be the social distancing. The moon in Taurus is making lovely aspects on Friday, very creative, and that's the other way that we're going to have to get through this new world is through our creativity, through our love, because Venus rules the sign of Taurus, through love, through creativity, and through persistence and not giving up. We can't. There's too much at stake, and we won't. But I think that it's also recognizing there are moments where we're going to feel we're going through many different stages, and that's okay. But this weekend will be another wacky one, unfortunately. But with that, we think on our feet. We're in a new place, in a new world, and we're new people, and we've invented ourselves. We're in a new place in life, and that means thinking on our feet, being very inventive and creative, and coming from a place of kindness and maybe more communication. And as we get to next week, the sun is leaving, Mercury is leaving Aries on the 27th. It's actually joining up in Taurus, and it's going to therefore then square Saturn in Aquarius on Tuesday. So what that means is, again, people feeling very frustrated in terms of getting work accomplished, or things that are experiencing delays in trying to get things done, feeling criticized, maybe feeling very self-critical. That's not good for communication. But as we get to them, that'll be on the 28th. And then on the 30th of April, the sun in Taurus, Mercury in Taurus meets up with Uranus, which is the higher octave of Mercury. And that is an aspect of ingenuity. That's an excellent networking combination. So that is very, very innovative thinking and excellent for all sorts of brainstorming, connecting with others. This is a time for you really to work and improve your social media. Those will be very rapidly changing platforms in the next couple of years with Saturn and Aquarius. That's realistic, but we're going to have to be using that more than ever for business and how we also transition to this new world. And what was the other thing? Venus now out of bounds. Well, it's out of bounds until July 2nd, I believe. But it's going to be retrograde from May 13th until June 25th, which means that Venus is in Gemini. It's going to reach as far as 21 degrees of Gemini when it stations retrograde on the 13th of May, and then it stations direct on June 5th on the 25th of June. Now, Venus in Gemini is very cerebral. It's also about communication and it's flirtatious energy. Often when a planet retrogrades, people from our past can return. And we have a few planets retrograding. Pluto's retrograding this week. Venus retrogrades on May 13th. That's a personal planet that only retrogrades once every year and a half. And Saturn, which is another key player of the year, stations retrograde on May 11th, which means we feel that energy 5 days before, so getting to about May 6th and 5 days after. The other big thing about, the beginning of May is the nodes of fate are changing signs. And so right now, the nodes of fate are at the world axis, which means, again, very big things in the world are happening right now. The nodes of fate at the world axis, that means anything at 0 degrees of Capricorn and 0 degrees of Cancer. Any of the cardinal signs at 0 degrees, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn are the world axis. Anything at 22 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn is the world axis. I'll give you another little lesson here. Anything at 7 degrees of the mutable signs, and those are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. That's the world axis. And anything at 15 degrees of the fixed signs is the world axis. And that is Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. Therefore, going back to where we are now, the nodes of fate are at 0 degrees of the cardinal signs. The south node is what we're meant to release. The north node is what we're meant to embrace. The south node in Capricorn, releasing more of what our old paradigms were about world status and public image and success. It doesn't mean that we're not still a capitalist world or society, but that we're reevaluating that success comes in many other ways and forms, and a lot of things. A lot of institutions will be finding new ways of doing things, and also that the nodes of fate are going from Capricorn, Cancer, to Sagittarius, Gemini, and those are the signs that will be experiencing a lot of change in the next few years. But anyway, this is a rocky weekend, but a very, very creative and brilliant one if used properly, and expect a lot of unexpected with the Sun conjunct Uranus on Sunday, with Mercury squaring Pluto, stationing retrograde. Whoa, it's a heavy weekend. And next week we've got the Mercury squaring Saturn, conjunct Uranus, and also Venus in Gemini is going to square Neptune on Sunday. And with it out of bounds, not playing by the rules, and with it being in its shadow, probably more deception around relationships gets uncovered, or finances next weekend, or maybe you find a secret lover. So anyway, thank you very much, and I wish you a lot of luck. Take care. Bye-bye.